So we are continuing our conversation today about conversations. We are going deep into really specific strategies that you can use to have great confidence when you're talking to people at events, at conferences, networking, social gatherings, all that sort of good stuff. Today, I cover some really cool things. Practical questions you can ask to pace lead people. Second of all, I cover how to turn up your curiosity and the one question you need to avoid at all costs. You need to avoid this one question. I cover that in this episode. And how to actually answer a question when someone asks you a question, how to not be that weird person, how to not answer questions in a weird way is how I give you some advice. And finally, how to exit. How do you exit a conversation when you're done with the conversation? You want to go on, but you don't offend the other person. How do you exit a conversation? I give you a whole bunch of scripts and tools and things that you can use with that. I trust today is going to be helpful. If you find conversations a little bit challenging, or even if you enjoy it, but you want to just get better at it, I think today's conversation about having conversations is going to be awesome. Let's get into it. Hey, it's Colin, and you are listening to the Expert Edge podcast. I was a professional speaker for over a decade, and now I focus on helping coaches, speakers, and course creators to speak and sell on virtual and live stages. The Expert Edge podcast is weekly content focused on helping you build your expert business. We cover marketing, storytelling, sales, communication skills, and so much more. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, and make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our social channels so you don't miss a thing. Let's listen to today's episode. So let's get into part 2 about how to have confident conversations at events. This is about meeting strangers. This is about being good at talking to new people. Now, if you haven't listened to episode 1, go back on the podcast, have a listen to that first, because that will lay the foundation. So if you haven't listened to episode 1, just literally go and click the other episode, because that'll lay the foundation for this conversation today. I got into it and I realized, wow, this is a bigger topic than I even realized. And so we talked about on session 1, the idea of that there's 3 big fears that everyone has: the fear of rejection, the fear of not belonging, the fear of not being successful or being seen as being interesting or successful. Based on those fears, first of all, they're human, they're normal. We have to be able to have conversations with people that don't trigger those fears. Because if you don't trigger those fears, you make people feel accepted, like they belong, and like they are successful. Do you know what? They will like you. Do you remember how I talked about on episode 1, part 1 of this, how I said one of my beliefs is that people are going to like me? The reason why I believe that is not because I think I'm amazing. It's because when I go into a conversation, I want them to feel safe, I want them to feel seen, and I want them to feel like they belong. And when I make them feel like that through the way that I talk to them and the patterns that I use, what happens is they in their mind go, I really like this person. Does that make sense? So it's not about you being a likable character. It's about, which is important, right? You still have to be likable. But it's like, to be likable, you don't have to be interesting. You don't have to be the most interesting person ever. You do have to be good at having conversations. And so we talked about preparing the mind, standing up straight physically, connecting with their eyes. Then we got onto this idea of pace, lead. Now, pace, lead is an influence strategy. If you study the structure of influence, the structure of influence suggests that when you meet someone, you shouldn't lead them in the conversation right away. What will tend to happen is if you don't start with pacing someone, you try to lead them too early, there will be resistance in their minds towards you. And you don't want resistance. Resistance represents a lack of rapport. When I first started understanding coaching and I did my coaching diploma, one of the big focuses was building rapport. And they actually believe this in coaching, transformational coaching, that any resistance or lack of change that you're seeing from your client is because of a lack of rapport. Now, what is rapport? Rapport is a sense of warmth. It's a sense of connection. It's a feeling of safety with someone. You know how like you've got some friends who you've been friends with for years and maybe you don't see them for like a year because they live overseas or something like that. And then you see them instantly, you're in rapport. instantly you're sharing the inner details of your life. Instantly you're laughing. Instantly, whatever that relationship is like with that person, instantly you're in rapport. That is because over time you have built trust and responsiveness with each other. You've built a sense of safety in your relationship. And so how do we create that safety, that instant rapport? Because I believe you can create very quick rapport with other people very easily. And so I want to share with you a few ways that you can do this. So first of all, pace, lead. Pace, lead is this idea of don't ask or share leading questions at the start of meeting someone. You want to pump the brakes, right? You want to pump the brakes with your question. What that means is it's the classic small talk. So sometimes, people say, I don't like small talk. Small talk is a part of getting to big talk. Small talk is a part of getting to deep conversations. Don't see small talk as pointless. See small talk as a pacing process to actually getting to leading and having a deeper conversation with them. So here are some pacing questions. A pacing question would be something like, you're at an event, you meet someone, you say, so how did you get connected here? How are you connected in with this event? I'm curious. And you even say that word, I'm curious. I'm wondering. That's a great way of saying, I'm wondering, how did you get connected in this event? Asking that question, it's not intrusive, but it's just curious based. It's not asking them to share their deepest, darkest secrets. It is just simply asking how they got connected. Another one, how long have you been coming here for? Have you been coming for a while, or is this one of your first times? How long have you been coming here for? Great question. Really good pacing question. I remember for me, when I'm up at the park and I meet a new parent, I'll say, have you been bringing your kids up to this park for long? How long have you been bringing your kids up to this park? It just starts the conversation. It's a pacing conversation. A pacing conversation, it's not intrusive. It's not too intense. I wouldn't ask something like, when did you get your kids out of diapers? Right? If I said, when did you get your kid out of diapers? It's like, oh, that's a bit intrusive, right? That's a bit too much. But I say, have you been bringing your kids up to this park for long? Right? It's not intrusive, not too intense. It's a pacing question. So don't think of small talk as a waste of time. Small talk is pacing. It's actually very strategic. The problem is that if you're in a relationship and all of it is just small talk, you actually never get to the deep talk. That's when it becomes boring, right? That's when it becomes pointless. But small talk is actually part of getting to the deep talk. Another question, have you come along to events like this before, or is this your first one? Right? That's a cool question. Now, so you're not going to ask, are you ready to mix and to mingle? You're not going to ask, so tell me about some of the biggest challenges you've had. So tell me about, what is your deepest dreams? It's so often, sometimes I've heard people teach how to have conversations and they're like, stop asking boring questions. Ask really interesting questions. Tell me about, what are your biggest dreams that you have? Now, we can get there, but just pump the brakes, people, right? You don't want to do that, because that is weird. That is when people start looking around going, how do I get out of this conversation as quick as I can? Right? So first of all, pace, lead. Now it's structurally, just look at what I said. Structurally is actually built like that on purpose. Pace, lead. So a leading conversation could be something like, what projects are you working on at work right now? As opposed to a pacing question is, what do you do with yourself? A good pacing question, what do you do with yourself outside of work? Right? What are some of your hobbies? That's a nice pacing question. A leading question is a little bit more, I say the word intrusive, but it's a little bit deeper. So what are some of the projects that you're finding most difficult? What are some of the projects that you're most excited about? I like that. What are some of the projects you're most excited about right now at work? What are the big projects you're working on, right? So tell me about, what area have you moved to? And what was that process like? We're starting to get more intimate in the conversation. So the more intimate you get in the conversation, the more leading the conversation is. So the pacing questions are the small questions. So have one or two pacing questions like, how did you get connected here? How long have you been coming along here? Have you been bringing the kids up to this park for long? Right? Just simple questions like that can just get you connected in, etc. The next piece of advice I have in building great conversations, having great conversations, is to amp up your curiosity dial. Now, what I mean by amp up your curiosity dial is anytime you feel awkward in a conversation, what you need to do is turn up your curiosity with the other person. So when I learned coaching, one of the things that I think most people, when they first start coaching, their biggest fear is not knowing what to say. Like when you're in a coaching conversation with a client, getting stuck and going, I don't know where we go to from here. That is one of the biggest fears that coaches have when they first start having coaching conversations. And what I learned to be really powerful is just to turn up my curiosity dial. Imagine you've got this big dial, goes from 1 to 10 on your chest, and you can literally just go and you can like turn it up. So imagine you're having a conversation with someone and you're saying, how did you get connected to this event? Are you enjoying the event? Like, who do you know here? Do you know many people here? Like, you're having that conversation and then you get like really awkward and you get stuck. That is where you turn up your curiosity. You literally just go, I'm really curious. Like, can you tell me more about that? Could be something that they mention. Maybe they mention, they're a part of a croquet club. Croquet, tell me about that. Like, how did you get into that? You ramp up the curiosity of anything that they mentioned or even anything that they're wearing sometimes. It's like if they've got a nice bag or shoes, tell me about where you got those shoes from. They're amazing. And so if you can give some sort of compliment, but you ramp it up with curiosity, really powerful. They will be like, this person is amazing. And all you're doing is making them feel seen, noticed, important, like they're successful, like they're interesting. And that makes them like you. When they like you, they want to work with you. They want to share you. They want to introduce you. That is how you build relationships, especially based on stranger networking conversations. One thing I would recommend you to avoid, don't ask why. If you ask why to someone, it makes people defensive. So if someone said, I just bought a property in this area, and you say, why did you do that? If you ask the word why, it puts people on the defense because they have to justify why they did that. What you want to do is you want to ask what questions or how questions. So it could be, rather than saying, why did you do that? You could ask, how did you get to that decision? Like, how did you get to moving there? What did that look like? As opposed to, why did you move there? Does that make sense? And so you say, how did you get to that? How did you get to that decision? Like, what was it that brought you to that? What was it that made you interested about that area? I'm really curious. What and how questions are usually a lot better than why questions. So avoid why questions. The last strategy I want to share with you today is how to actually answer questions when people ask you a question. Let's say someone says, how did you get connected to this event? Right? You could say, I've just got some friends here. Then essentially you're leaving it to them to do all the work to scrounge for something to keep the conversation going. So being a good conversationalist is providing enough data points for the conversation to continue. So if someone says something like this, how did you get connected to this event? You don't say, I just know a few people here. You would say something like, well, actually, this is one of the first events that I've come to actually. But one of my friends, John's been coming along for about 3 years. He's one of the vice presidents of the industry. We've done some bike riding together. I think our kids do soccer as well. So I met him like 3 or 4 years ago, but that's kind of how I got connected to this event. How about yourself? Now, what you've done then, first of all, you've answered the question with enough information to give them some context. You've given them 3 or 4 big data points to go off. So they could ask you a question about John. You could ask you a question about soccer, with the kids' soccer. You could ask them a question about how John became the vice president of the club. You've given them a few data points for them to go off. So when you throw back the question and you say something like, how about yourself? How about yourself? How did you get connected? They've got more data points for them to find some rapport or some sameness with your situation. If you say the opposite of what they say, you break rapport. So for example, let's say someone says, I got connected with John. He's the vice president. I've known him for a while. We go riding together, and also our kids play soccer together in just a local league. How about yourself? And you say something like, our kids have never been involved in soccer. I don't really like cycling. I don't really understand that at all. But I've been coming along for a little while. This is, like my 3rd event. Right. And people do this. Like we kind of laugh about, but people do this. They mismatch what the conversation's happening. So you're basically mismatching the content that the other person is sharing. And so one of the best ways to build rapport, connection, relationships with people is to match them. And what I mean by match them is you find something in common from the data points that they've shared, right? And so you could say something like, oh, that's so cool. I haven't met John yet, but that's so fascinating how he's the vice president. Do you know, in terms of John, like how long has he been a part of it? Right. And then you just continue the conversation. Or, oh, that's so cool. So your kids play soccer. What soccer league are they involved in at the moment? Oh, yeah, my kids are really considering playing soccer. Were your kids like right into it right at the start? Or were they a little bit hesitant? Because I know for us, like I want to get them into it, but they're a little bit unsure at the moment. Like, how did it work for you? And so you're giving them some data points. You're giving them some level of vulnerability, but you're not saying something like, oh, yeah, I've never met John. Like I've never met the vice president. I actually get really scared, to be frank, of meeting people who are pretty high level in clubs. And I have no idea how to get my kids into soccer. Like that would just be so overwhelming, right? You're kind of starting to open up. And you know what? I actually am really, really bad at most sports. Like I'm just terrible. Like, as soon as you start getting like that, people get the weirder meter going and they're going to want to avoid you having a conversation. So let me give you some more nuances on this. You provide a few data points with your answer, but not too many and for not too long. And I think this is true even with podcast interviews, by the way. So if you ever have the privilege of being a guest on the Expert Edge, when you answer the question with a couple of sentences, maybe one example, and then you stop, you close out, you give the interviewer a chance to ask the next question. You let the conversation going. Have you ever found that when you're listening to an interview even, and the person just literally talks for like 7 minutes straight, and you're just like so overwhelmed by all the things that they've said because they haven't had any breathing room in the conversation? That's what people do when they're mingling, when they're having conversations with strangers. So if you ever have a person who just basically forces their entire world onto you, you are going to pull back. And it's really interesting energetically. When someone gives you too much information, they're actually trying to open up their world to you. But what actually happens is energetically, you end up pulling back from them. Have you ever noticed that? You end up pulling back from them because it's like they're trying to prove something or trying to put too much information out there, too much of themselves out there. And you're like, that's a little bit too much information, TMI. And so when you answer a question, give them 2 or 3 data points and then throw it back to them and ask the same question of them. It's as simple as that. Give them 2 or 3 data points. Allow your brain to just jump around. There's no right or wrong answer. Give them 2 or 3 data points. Throw back to them with the same question. Someone says, have you been bringing the kids up to the park for long? And you say something like, yeah, this is like the 2nd or 3rd time we've brought the kids up. My son, he's 3, and my daughter, she's 7. She absolutely just loves the slippery dip, that spinny thing. So yeah, and we just moved into the area. So it's been kind of cool. How about yourself? Have you been bringing the kids up? So I've given them a few data points, the age of my kids, what things they like, that I'm new to the area, and then I throw it back to them with the same question. And that allows the conversation to go. So what we're doing here is we're pacing, and then eventually we get into leading. Leading may not even happen in that initial conversation. And so one thing to do is when you finish the conversation, you can just simply just decide and just go, hey, it was so great to have the conversation with you. Hope to see you again. Bye for now. Like literally, you can just finish it like that. When it gets super awkward, you can just go, hey, it's so great to have this conversation with you. I've got to go and check on the kids. I've got to go and do something. You can like throw it to something. That can be a really cool way of doing it. If you ever want to get out of an awkward situation, hey, it was so great to meet you. Really appreciate the conversation. I've got a few things I've got to do over here, but I trust and I hope you enjoy the night. I hope to see you soon, right? That's really nice, really simple. Give them a little compliment. So good. You've got one thing you've got to jump to, but hope you enjoy the night. You throw back to them that one last time of like, hope you enjoy the night. So good to meet you. So you go compliment, got to go do something, compliment. That structure can work really well in terms of getting out of a conversation. So hopefully that is helpful. I've given you lots of great tips here. I would love to know, send me a little DM on Instagram. What's been most helpful from this little podcast episode about how to have confident conversations with people at networking events? We've talked about the 3 big fears. We talked about preparing your mind on episode 1, standing up straight, taking up space, physicality on episode 1, connecting with people's eyes on episode 1. And then we transitioned into episode 2 on pace, lead, amping your curiosity, and how to answer questions, and then how to exit a conversation. Boom. Boomski. I trust this has been useful. I hope it has. Make sure you are subscribed to the show. If you think this is going to be helpful for someone that you know, that you think they would enjoy or just find value in this conversation, maybe you too are one of those people who go to conferences and you've had conversations with them going, hey, will you be my buddy? Will you come to the conference with me? Send it to them. Send them a text. I know I always listen to podcasts when my friends send me texts with the podcast. So please do that. If you can do one thing for me, send them a text with the podcast and bless someone else with this content. It's completely free, and I hope you enjoy it. Bless you guys. We'll talk to you really soon. Bye for now.